There are moments in life when charm is not kindness, and sweetness is not sincerity. Sometimes what appears as affection is a delicate web, woven strand by strand with the softest silk of emotions. And you don't realize you've been caught until you try to move, only to find that your freedom was taken long ago. There are women, not all, but some. Women who have learned how to use emotion not as an expression of love, but as a weapon, a mask, or a method of control. They understand the fragility of a heart that longs to be seen, and they build their power on that longing. These women have studied the language of feelings the way a musician studies sound. They know when to raise their voice, when to fall silent, and when to shed a single tear that doesn't come from sorrow, but from strategy. They understand that people, especially those who love deeply, crave connection and validation. And so they use empathy not to heal but to manipulate, not to share but to extract. They wrap their intentions in vulnerability, and the world claps for them because it looks like tenderness. You see, cunning does not always come with a sharp tongue or a loud demand. Sometimes it comes wrapped in gentleness. Sometimes it wears the face of a woman who seems too delicate to harm anyone. Her pain looks real, her wounds look deep, but beneath that fragility lies precision. She knows exactly how to make you feel guilty for your boundaries, how to make you question your instincts, how to make you feel like you are cruel for protecting yourself. That is her art, turning her emotionality into a mirror that reflects your kindness back at you until you drown in your own empathy. There is something intoxicating about someone who seems to need you. It makes you feel powerful. It makes you feel worthy. But the truth is, not every cry for help is pure. Some are traps dressed in tragedy. A cunning woman understands this better than anyone. She builds a story of hardship so vivid that your heart aches to be her savior. And in saving her, you begin to lose yourself. You stop listening to your logic. You forget what is fair. You bend your own boundaries until they snap. And when they do, she will cry again, not for you, but for herself, and you will once again feel like the villain. That is how emotional traps work. They are invisible cages made of guilt and pity. The cunning woman doesn't always ask for much. Sometimes, all she asks for is your attention. But she will make you feel that withholding it is cruelty. She will make you believe that love must always mean sacrifice. And if you hesitate to give her what she wants, she will look at you with eyes that speak of betrayal. You will feel the weight of her silence as if it were a storm, and suddenly you are apologizing for things you didn't even do. It begins innocently. An argument you try to resolve, a mood you try to lift, a pain you try to soothe. But every time you comfort her, she learns what works. Every time you chase after her silence, she learns that disappearing gets results. Every time you explain yourself to fix her misunderstanding, she learns that confusion is power. Over time, she doesn't have to demand anymore. You start doing it on your own. You begin to anticipate her reactions, to avoid anything that might trigger her displeasure. You call that love, but she calls it control. And she'll never shout it, never show her cards. Her manipulation lives in subtleties. The sigh that comes after your truth, the look that tells you you've disappointed her, the trembling voice that says, "I thought you were different." Each phrase is a thread, and before you know it, those threads have tied themselves around your conscience. You can't speak your mind without guilt. You can't set boundaries without shame. You can't walk away without feeling cruel. It's important to understand that not every woman who feels deeply is cunning. Not every tear hides deceit. But the difference between genuine emotion and emotional traps lies in intention. A genuine heart expresses feelings to connect. A cunning one expresses feelings to control. A genuine woman cries because she is hurt. A cunning woman cries because it keeps her in power. She may not even know what she's doing at first. Sometimes, Manipulation is a learned survival. Some women have been ignored for so long, unseen, unheard, dismissed, that they learn to use emotion as the only language that guarantees attention. When kindness failed, when logic was dismissed, when truth brought only rejection, they discovered that tears brought compassion. So they kept using tears until they forgot how to be honest without them. What began as self-protection becomes a performance. And like any performance, the audience becomes the captive. The tragedy is that this kind of cunning robs everyone. Her and the ones she entraps. She loses the chance to be truly known, and those who love her lose the ability to trust. Relationships become a battlefield of feelings rather than a home of understanding. The cunning woman does not want to hurt. She wants to feel safe. But safety built on manipulation is always temporary. The moment you stop playing your role, the curtain falls. She becomes angry, defensive, or withdrawn, and you become the villain in her story once again. There's a quiet power in knowing when you're being pulled by invisible strings. You must learn to recognize emotional traps not by their sound, but by their silence. Notice when someone's sadness always ends with you doing what they want. Notice when apologies are always one-sided. Notice when love feels like obligation. Notice when guilt has replaced peace. Because love that constantly demands your rescue is not love. It is dependence. A cunning woman will often present herself as misunderstood. She will tell you that nobody ever cared like you do, that you are different, that you are special. And in that moment, your heart swells because you want to believe it. But what she really means is you are easy to persuade. You are empathetic. You are the kind of soul that cannot watch someone suffer. And that is the lever she will use every time. Emotional traps are not always dramatic. Sometimes, they look like kindness returned with conditions. They look like forgiveness that comes with a price. They look like love that suffocates and approval that depends on obedience. And the most dangerous thing about it is that she will make you question your reality. When you confront her, she'll say you're overreacting. When you step back, she'll say you're abandoning her. When you stay, she'll remind you that you're not doing enough. It's a loop with no exit except awareness. Awareness is your freedom. Once you see the pattern, you stop responding to it. Once you stop reacting, the trap loses its power. The cunning woman feeds on emotional reaction. Silence starves her game. But silence doesn't mean cruelty. It means discernment. It means you choose peace over performance. It means you let her tears fall without letting them direct your choices. It means you love with open eyes instead of blind compassion. You cannot save someone who manipulates their pain. Because to them, the pain is a tool. They need it to keep you close. And the moment you try to fix it, they will find another reason to keep it alive. You must understand that some people do not want healing. They want control. They confuse being cared for with being powerful. And as long as that confusion lives, their relationships will never be balanced. But let us not judge too harshly. Cunning, too, comes from pain. Somewhere in her past, that woman learned that honesty didn't protect her, that vulnerability led to rejection, that her emotions were the only thing that got results. She learned that the world responded only when she cried. So she built her identity around that response. Now she cannot imagine love without suffering. She cannot imagine connection without conflict. And every person who enters her life becomes another stage where she reenacts her past. The cure for such cunning is not punishment, it is truth. Truth that is calm, consistent, and unbending. When you stop reacting emotionally and start responding with reason, her strategies crumble. When you stop apologizing for doing what's healthy, her guilt loses its grip. When you love her without losing yourself, she either grows or she leaves. Either way, you win peace. If you've ever been caught in such a web, forgive yourself. You were not foolish. You were compassionate. You saw pain and tried to heal it. You heard cries and tried to answer them. You believed that love could fix everything, and that is a beautiful belief. But love without boundaries is not love. It is surrender. Love must be strong enough to say no, even when the eyes looking back at you are filled with tears. Emotional traps lose their strength when you understand that guilt is not love, and pity is not intimacy. Real love does not need to manipulate to survive. It does not need to test, to guilt, to control. Real love is gentle but firm, kind but honest, giving but grounded. It does not demand your sacrifice. It invites your authenticity. And if you are the one who has used emotional traps, if you have caught yourself crying not from pain but from strategy, if you have learned to play fragile so others will stay, then it's time to look deeper. That cunning you used to survive was once your protection. But now it is your prison. It keeps people close but never connected. It brings sympathy but not respect. It gives attention but not love. The world may bend to your emotions, but it will never truly embrace you until you stop performing. You must learn to communicate without manipulation, to ask without guilt, to express without controlling. You must learn to be seen without theatrics and loved without testing. Because when you drop the act, something miraculous happens. The people who remain love you for real. They love your truth, not your performance. They stay not because they feel sorry for you, but because they feel safe with you. And that kind of love is the only love worth having. Cunning women may seem powerful, but their power is fragile. It depends on others being unaware. The moment someone sees through the illusion, the power fades. True power does not need tricks. It does not need tears as weapons. True power comes from integrity, from knowing that you can stand in your truth and still be loved. In every relationship, there are moments when emotions run high. We are all capable of manipulation when we feel desperate. But the difference between maturity and cunning is awareness. A mature woman says, "I feel hurt, but I do not need to hurt you to be seen." A cunning one says, "If I hurt, you must hurt too." One creates healing, the other creates dependency. Do not let anyone convince you that love should feel like walking on eggshells. Do not mistake drama for depth or intensity for intimacy. The loudest love is not always the strongest. Sometimes it is the most insecure. Real love moves quietly. It builds trust in small, steady moments. It respects silence as much as it celebrates connection. It doesn't demand that you prove yourself through pain. If you ever find yourself trapped in emotional games, step back and breathe. The truth will always feel peaceful even when it hurts. Lies always feel urgent. If someone rushes you into guilt, slow down. If someone confuses disagreement with betrayal, pause. If someone makes you believe your boundaries are cruelty, remember that love without respect is not love. Cunning women use emotional traps because they fear being powerless. But power built on manipulation is an illusion that fades in the light of truth. And when that light shines, when awareness rises, you begin to see clearly that no one can control your emotions unless you hand them the strings. You begin to see that compassion must include self-respect. You begin to understand that protecting your peace is not selfish. It is sacred. So walk in truth, speak your heart, but never let guilt dictate your choices. Love deeply, but love wisely. Feel fully, but never become enslaved by another's moods. The world is full of emotion, but only those who balance feeling with clarity truly live free. In the end, cunning fades. Manipulation always collapses under its own weight. But truth endures. The woman who learns to use honesty instead of guilt, who learns to be vulnerable without weaponizing it, becomes radiant. Her power no longer depends on others bending to her emotions. It flows from her authenticity. She doesn't need to trap anyone, because she has freed herself. And to those who have been trapped before, know this: you can forgive without returning. You can understand without excusing. You can love someone from afar without entering their storm. The lesson was never about her cunning. It was about your awakening. It taught you where your empathy ends and your dignity begins. It showed you that not all softness deserves your loyalty, and not all tears deserve your rescue. There will always be those who mistake control for connection, but your job is not to fix them. It is to remain free. You can't save someone who uses emotion as a leash. You can only save yourself. And when you do, when you walk away from manipulation and toward truth, you reclaim the most precious thing that was ever yours. Your peace. And that peace, once found, becomes unshakable. It teaches you how to love without losing yourself, how to care without being consumed, and how to see through the sweetest traps with eyes wide open. That is not coldness, that is wisdom. And wisdom, once learned, becomes the most beautiful kind of strength there is. Because in a world where cunning often wears the mask of kindness, the greatest victory is to stay kind without becoming blind. And once you've learned that, no one, not even the most cunning, can ever trap you again. Cunning women turn vulnerability into their greatest weapon, because they understand how deeply people respond to pain. They know that when someone appears fragile, the human instinct is to protect, to comfort, to draw near. They have studied this reaction, perhaps not consciously at first, but over time they have learned that weakness, or what looks like weakness, can move mountains faster than strength ever could. They recognize that genuine vulnerability opens hearts, but they twist that power into something that benefits them alone. It becomes a calculated softness, a tool used to disarm others and make them feel responsible for emotions that do not belong to them. This kind of vulnerability is not about connection. It's about control wrapped in tenderness, about pulling sympathy from others without ever truly offering honesty in return. These women understand timing. They know exactly when to cry, when to tremble, when to fall silent and let someone else's conscience fill the space. Their expressions, their pauses, their tones are rehearsed through experience, not necessarily through malice, but through repetition of what has worked before. Vulnerability becomes their stage, and they perform on it masterfully. They may speak of their pain in ways that captivate the listener, weaving just enough truth into their story to make it believable, just enough heartbreak to make it irresistible. And the listener, unaware of the manipulation, begins to offer comfort, reassurance, validation, until the lines blur between compassion and captivity. To someone watching from the outside, it looks like sensitivity, softness, emotional depth. But underneath that softness is a quiet calculation, a knowing that emotion can bend the will of others more effectively than anger or reason ever could. They wield sadness like a sword wrapped in silk. Every sigh, every tear, every story of betrayal serves a purpose: to make the other person lean in, to create a dependency disguised as empathy. The cunning woman is rarely loud, because she doesn't have to be. Her vulnerability does the talking for her. There's an artistry in how she presents her pain. It's never too heavy, never too dramatic, just enough to make you believe you can fix it. She will look into your eyes and let her voice crack, and in that moment, you will feel like the only person in the world who truly understands her. That illusion of intimacy is the root of her control. Once you believe that she trusts you with her brokenness, you begin to feel needed. And when you feel needed, you become predictable, easy to guide, easy to influence. She no longer has to demand anything outright. Your empathy does it for her. Her vulnerability is her armor and her weapon at the same time. She uses it to avoid accountability, to shift focus, to win sympathy. She turns emotional exposure into a form of power, knowing that few people can walk away from someone who appears to be hurting. It is not that she feels nothing. She feels deeply. But she has learned to direct those feelings outward, to make them serve her needs rather than heal her wounds. They control through compassion, not commands, because direct control draws resistance, but compassion disarms. A cunning woman knows that authority delivered with a gentle voice is more persuasive than any demand shouted from anger. She has studied the psychology of care. She understands that when someone feels needed, they willingly surrender their independence. So she cloaks her intentions in kindness, speaks softly, and gives just enough affection to make the other person crave more. It doesn't feel like control at first. It feels like connection, like being chosen, like being seen. That's the brilliance of her strategy. She doesn't push, she pulls, wrapping her influence around the heart rather than forcing it through fear. Her compassion becomes the hook. She listens attentively, remembers details, makes you feel like no one has ever understood you quite like she does. Her words are gentle, her eyes are soft, and she never appears threatening. But behind that warmth lies an awareness of how much power exists in making someone feel safe. When people feel safe, they let their guard down, they share secrets, they expose insecurities. And once she knows what you fear, what you long for, what makes you feel validated, she uses that knowledge to guide your choices. You begin to align your behavior with her emotional comfort, not because she asked you to, but because she made you want to. Compassion, when used with purity, heals. But when used strategically, it binds. The cunning woman offers care selectively, rewarding you with affection when you meet her expectations and withdrawing it when you don't. You find yourself chasing her approval, trying to stay in her good graces, because her compassion feels like sunlight after a storm. She doesn't have to raise her voice or make threats. She simply withdraws her warmth, and that absence hurts more than anger ever could. You start monitoring your words, softening your tone, adjusting your truth to keep her calm. Her peace becomes your responsibility. That's how control through compassion takes root, quietly, invisibly, wrapped in emotional intelligence that feels nurturing until you realize it's limiting. Her control works because it feels good. It's not coercion, it's comfort. You want to please her because pleasing her feels like love. You tell yourself she deserves your patience, your effort, your understanding. But in time, the balance shifts. You notice that her kindness has conditions, that her empathy only flows in one direction, that she gives most freely when it benefits her emotionally. When you try to express your needs, she reminds you of how much she's done for you, how patient she's been, how much she cares. Her compassion becomes a subtle reminder of your debt. You start to feel guilty for wanting more, for asking for space, for choosing yourself. And that's when the illusion of compassion reveals itself as control disguised as love. This kind of influence doesn't bruise the body, it softens the will. It doesn't imprison with force, it imprisons with gratitude. It makes you feel lucky to be cared for, even as your freedom quietly fades. Guilt is their language of power, because it speaks directly to the conscience of those who love with open hearts. A cunning woman doesn't need to shout or argue when she can make you feel responsible for her pain. She knows that guilt is one of the most powerful motivators in human emotion. It can make people act against their own needs, silence their truth, and apologize for simply being themselves. When she uses guilt, she doesn't accuse directly, she implies. Her words are soft, her tone calm, but her meaning pierces through your defenses. I just thought you cared more. She might say, or I didn't expect you to hurt me like this. And suddenly, you are no longer standing on solid ground. You start second-guessing your intentions, doubting your worth, rewriting reality in her favor. She has mastered the art of suggestion. She never says you are wrong outright. She simply allows you to come to that conclusion on your own. The guilt she plants doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like moral awakening. You believe you are doing the right thing by fixing, by comforting, by compensating. And that's how her control deepens. Every time you surrender to guilt, she learns how to use it better. She knows when to go quiet, when to sigh, when to look away, when to remind you of how much she has endured. Each subtle gesture becomes a thread of emotional responsibility that wraps around your heart until you can no longer tell whether your actions are driven by love or by the need to escape her disappointment. Guilt for her replaces communication. Instead of expressing needs directly, she makes you feel guilty for not already knowing them. Instead of asking for more, she makes you feel selfish for wanting anything yourself. It's a language built on emotional insinuation, where her silence can mean accusation and her sadness can mean blame. You start walking on eggshells, trying to predict what might upset her next, because every misstep comes with a quiet punishment. The look, the tone, the shift in energy that tells you failed her again. And because she rarely confronts you directly, you can never truly defend yourself. You simply feel responsible endlessly for emotions that aren't yours to carry. This is how guilt becomes her power. It keeps you invested, keeps you cautious, keeps you compliant. You tell yourself that keeping her happy is the same as keeping peace, but that peace is only temporary. Beneath it lies resentment, confusion, exhaustion. You lose sight of your own needs because guilt clouds your clarity. You start believing that love means constant apology, constant compromise, constant emotional debt. And she thrives on that belief, because as long as you feel guilty, she never has to change. She can remain the victim and the authority at once, the one who forgives but never forgets, the one who controls without ever appearing cruel. Guilt allows her to remain blameless, while keeping you bound, powerless, and devoted to mending a pain that was never truly yours to heal. They make you mistake pity for love, because pity feels close to compassion, and compassion feels close to care. A cunning woman knows how to blur those lines until you can no longer tell where empathy ends and affection begins. She builds her story around pain, around hardship, around wounds that never seem to heal. She speaks of betrayal, of being misunderstood, of being the one who always gives but never receives. Her words are soft and aching, her tone heavy with sorrow, and as you listen, your heart bends toward her. You begin to feel for her what she wants you to feel, sympathy dressed as devotion. She doesn't need to convince you to love her, she only needs you to feel sorry enough to stay. There is power in pity, because it turns the other person into a protector. Once you start protecting her, you stop seeing clearly. You overlook her flaws, you forgive her inconsistencies, you justify her behavior. Every mistake becomes an extension of her pain. Every outburst becomes a cry for help. You start excusing things that hurt you because you're afraid of adding to her suffering. And she knows this. She knows that as long as she remains the fragile one, the wounded one, the misunderstood one, you will keep giving more than you should. She doesn't have to ask for control. Your pity gives it to her willingly. This kind of emotional dynamic feels tender at first. It feels noble to care for someone so broken, so delicate. You think love means healing them, saving them, proving that not everyone leaves. But what you don't see is that she never truly lets herself be healed. Her pain is her currency, her means of keeping your attention. If she lets it go, she risks losing the power it gives her. So, every time you soothe her, another wound appears. Every time you fix one thing, something else falls apart. Her sorrow never ends because it was never meant to. It was meant to sustain the connection, to keep you tied to her through responsibility instead of freedom. The line between pity and love becomes so blurred that you start confusing your exhaustion with commitment. You tell yourself you're staying because you care, but deep down, you're staying because you feel guilty to leave. You've become attached to her suffering, invested in her sadness. It makes you feel needed, valuable, important. But love that depends on another's pain isn't love, it's dependency in disguise. The cunning woman feeds that dependency gently. She thanks you for your patience. She calls you her rock. She tells you that no one understands her like you do. And while those words sound like affection, they're really reinforcement. Reminders that your role is to carry her. Through pity, she becomes the center of your emotional world. Your happiness begins to orbit her sadness. You measure your worth by how much peace you can bring her. But no matter how much you give, it's never enough, because her power thrives on imbalance. The more you pour into her, the emptier you become. And the emptier you become, the stronger her hold grows. Silence becomes their sharpest form of control, because it carries more weight than words ever could. A cunning woman understands that silence is not emptiness. It is pressure. It is discomfort. It is an invisible force that makes people desperate for resolution. When she withdraws her voice, it isn't because she has nothing to say. It's because she knows that silence makes others speak more, explain more, give more. It places the burden of repair on you. You begin to wonder what you did wrong, replaying every moment in your mind, trying to find the mistake that caused her retreat. That is where her power begins, when you start trying to earn back her attention instead of asking why she took it away. Her silence is not peaceful, it's calculated. It creates an imbalance, a tension that demands your effort. She uses it when she wants to punish without appearing cruel, when she wants to manipulate without confrontation. Instead of arguing, she becomes distant. Instead of clarifying, she disappears into quiet. You find yourself reaching out, apologizing, explaining, trying to fill the space she leaves behind. And she watches, calm and composed, knowing that your anxiety grows stronger with every unanswered message, every long pause, every cold glance. That is how she controls without ever raising her voice. By making you afraid of the quiet. The brilliance of this silence is that it appears innocent. No one can accuse her of saying something hurtful when she hasn't said anything at all. She can deny manipulation because her actions are subtle, intangible. Yet the effect is profound. You start adjusting your behavior, softening your tone, suppressing your needs, all in an effort to avoid another stretch of silence. You convince yourself that her quiet means she's hurt, that she needs space, that you must fix what's broken. But what's really happening is a quiet conditioning. You are being trained to associate peace with compliance and silence with punishment. Over time, her silence becomes the loudest thing in the relationship. It dictates how you move, what you say, what you feel safe expressing. You learn to read her moods through the absence of communication, and you begin to fear that absence more than conflict itself. When she finally speaks again, relief floods your body. You thank her for returning, even though you did nothing wrong, and that relief becomes addictive. It keeps you bound to her approval, always anticipating, always pleasing, always walking the line between comfort and punishment. Silence allows her to maintain the appearance of calm control while you unravel internally. It gives her power without the mess of confrontation, dominance without aggression. It's her way of reminding you that connection exists only on her terms. And so, every time she withdraws, you chase, not realizing that your chase is exactly what sustains her power. She doesn't need to demand your attention. She just withholds hers, knowing you'll offer everything to bring it back. The trap isn't in their words. It's in how they make you feel. Cunning women understand that emotions are far more powerful than language. They know that people may forget what you say, but they never forget how you made them feel. So they speak in a way that bypasses logic and slips straight into your emotional bloodstream. They don't argue, they influence. They don't demand, they evoke. Every word is chosen not for meaning, but for effect. They understand the psychology of tone, the weight of pauses, and the invisible force behind subtle expressions. They don't need to shout to be heard. Their silence does all the talking. Their emotional intelligence allows them to craft experiences that stay long after the moment has passed, leaving you questioning yourself, questioning reality, and often questioning your worth. They master the art of creating feelings you can't name, but can't escape. When they want your sympathy, they'll make you feel guilty for not understanding their pain. When they want your loyalty, they'll make you feel indebted to their vulnerability. When they want your attention, they'll make you feel as though your absence causes them to break. And when they want control, they'll make you believe you're the one holding the power. They weave emotional illusions so effortlessly that even the most perceptive minds get caught in them. It's not about manipulation through lies. It's about steering your emotional responses so subtly that you start reacting exactly how they want without realizing it. The most dangerous part of their influence is that it feels like connection. You think you're bonding. You think you're growing closer. You think you're understanding each other. But what's really happening is calibration. They are learning your emotional language. What comforts you, what scares you, what triggers your guilt, and what earns your affection. And once they learn it, they use it. They will know exactly when to cry, when to retreat, when to stay silent, and when to be sweet. Each reaction will be perfectly timed to pull at your empathy, to make you act out of emotion instead of reason. You'll think you're making choices from love, but you'll actually be moving according to a script they've written through the emotions they've planted in you. They rarely attack directly. Instead, they use emotional undertones to guide your behavior. A disappointed sigh replaces confrontation. A quiet withdrawal replaces argument. A look of hurt replaces explanation. You begin to adjust your actions just to avoid those subtle signals of pain. You find yourself over-explaining, apologizing, and trying harder to please them without ever being asked to. That's the trap. It's not the words, it's the emotional conditioning behind them. You become addicted to their moods because your peace starts depending on their emotional stability. You stop living from your center and start revolving around their feelings. Cunning women are masters at emotional timing. They know that feelings are strongest when they arrive unexpectedly. So they'll pull back their affection just long enough for you to crave it, then return it in small doses so it feels like a reward. This cycle keeps you chasing, always wanting to get back to the warmth they once gave so freely. It's not that they lie to you. It's that they use emotional truth as a leash. They can make you feel guilty without saying you did anything wrong, make you feel responsible without assigning blame, and make you feel needed without ever saying they need you. The brilliance lies in how they blend truth with manipulation. They don't fake emotions, they amplify them. Their sadness might be real, but the timing of when they reveal it is strategic. Their affection might be genuine, but they offer it when it benefits them most. Their vulnerability might be authentic, but it's presented in a way that keeps you emotionally tethered. They understand that people crave emotional purpose. To feel like they matter, to feel like they make a difference, to feel like they are saving someone. So they give you that purpose, but in a way that serves their own control. The emotional trap works because it doesn't feel like one. It feels like empathy, like connection, like love. You don't see manipulation, you see meaning. You don't see control, you see care. And by the time you begin to sense the imbalance, you're already too emotionally invested to walk away. You remember the moments when they made you feel seen, the softness in their tone, the rare glimpses of affection. Those moments replay in your mind like promises, keeping you anchored in hope. You tell yourself it's just a phase, just stress, just misunderstanding. But the truth is, the trap has already closed. You've built an emotional home in someone else's storm. What makes them so effective is their ability to make contradictions feel natural. They can hurt you and still make you feel like you hurt them. They can distance themselves, but make you feel like you abandoned them. They can create chaos and still convince you they're the ones trying to fix it. This reversal of emotional responsibility is their sharpest weapon. You end up apologizing for things you didn't do, trying to heal wounds you didn't cause, and carrying guilt for feelings that aren't yours. They turn your empathy into a leash, your love into a tool of compliance. They will always frame their emotions as a response, not a strategy. "I'm just sensitive," they'll say. "You know how deeply I feel." They make it seem as though you're overreacting to their reactions. But what you're really witnessing is emotional theater, an act so polished it feels spontaneous. They don't need to manipulate constantly, just enough to keep you emotionally off balance. That imbalance becomes the rhythm of the relationship, moments of deep connection, followed by waves of cold distance. Apologies followed by silence, tenderness followed by guilt. Each phase makes you crave the next moment of peace, keeping you bound to the cycle. Their power lies in your emotional engagement. They know that once your heart is involved, your logic weakens. Once you start caring deeply, you stop questioning. So they focus not on changing your mind, but on shaping your emotional world. They make you feel things so intensely that clarity becomes impossible. You don't see manipulation, you see love expressed differently. You don't see the pattern, you see isolated moments of confusion that you think you can fix with understanding. But understanding doesn't free you. It deepens the attachment. Over time, you realize that you're constantly trying to win back the warmth they strategically withdraw. You become the one working to restore balance, while they remain calm, distant, and quietly in control. They can stand in silence and make you feel like you're the one who ruined everything. Their ability to shift emotional energy is uncanny. They can create guilt without accusation, fear without threat, and love without effort. They understand that emotions are more persuasive than logic ever will be, and they wield that knowledge like invisible power. Even when you start to see the manipulation, it's not easy to escape, because the emotional bonds they create are not based on dependency alone. They're based on hope. Hope that the warmth will return. Hope that they truly mean what they say when they apologize. Hope that your love can finally heal them. That hope blinds you to the fact that the entire relationship has been built on emotional conditioning. They don't need to trap you with promises or lies. They trap you with the way they make you feel when you're with them, and the emptiness you feel when you're not. Their genius lies in subtlety. They will never raise their voice, rarely accuse directly, and often seem like the one who is just too emotional. But in that emotional intensity lies their command. They can make a simple word sound like forgiveness or punishment depending on their tone. They can end a conversation without saying goodbye, yet leave you haunted by the absence. You'll replay their words in your mind, searching for meaning, trying to understand. But the meaning isn't in the words, it's in the emotional imprint they leave behind. And that is their true mastery. They don't win arguments, they win emotions. They don't convince you, they condition you. Their words are only vessels for energy, and it's that energy that keeps you entangled. Because long after the conversation ends, long after the apologies fade, you'll still feel something stirring inside you, something unresolved, something that pulls you back. That lingering feeling is the residue of their control, the echo of the emotional spell they've cast. Not through manipulation of words, but through the manipulation of your heart.